Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anovella. Today is the 14th of February and that doesn't only mean Valentine's Day, but way more important, it's the first wrap-up of our Classics&Company group read. We read the first 6 weeks of this year, Dangerous Liaisons. Micah Cummins and I, we are the hosts throughout the year, and we have one special host each time we read a book, and for the first book it was Elisabeth from Book and Books. Elisabeth, tell me, what is the book about and what were your thoughts about the book?
The book is Les Liaisons Dangereuses, Dangerous Liaisons by Choderlos de Laclos. It was written in the 18th century in the fashion of the time, which is an epistolary novel. So all the plot, we know about it because the characters are writing letters to one another. So the main characters are the Marquise de Merteuil. In the English translation, is the title translated? Marchioness?
The translation of Marquise is Marquise, I think.
So she is the Marquise de Merteuil, and she is friends with the Viscount of Valmont. And they are quite pervert characters, I'm going to say. They want to sleep with a lot of people, and they want to corrupt a lot of people. So Mr. Valmont decides to corrupt one woman who is supposed to be one of the most virtuous. She's pretty, she's young, she's married. Her husband is away on business, and she is staying with his aunt. So he decides that that's going to be his hobby for the summer while he's visiting his aunt, that he's going to seduce that woman. Meanwhile, his friend, the Marquise de Merteuil, would like him very much to corrupt a young woman of 15, 16 years old, because this young woman, Cécile de Volanges, is about to marry her former lover, Mrs. de Merteuil's former lover. So she would like it very much if the young bride did not arrive a virgin on the wedding night. That would be her little revenge for having been dumped. So this is the evil plot that the two friends are scheming, and through the letters, we see the various relations between the people evolving from completely innocent to a lot less innocent, and we see the evil of certain characters and the naivety and perhaps stupidity of some other characters. And yeah, that's the plot, basically.
And Micah, what did you think of the book?
I enjoyed it. I found it very reminiscent of sort of a modern soap opera with the back and forth between all of the characters, and everything is very over the top dramatic, and everything is a life or death moment, and it's all very very opulent and wordy, over the top. But I thought it was very, very fun. Just a very over the top drama. Having the epistolary form, I haven't read a lot of epistolary novels. And so I really enjoyed sort of learning about the form with this, which is, I think, is probably a masterpiece of that form, I'm assuming.
I absolutely agree. This and Frankenstein. No, not Frankenstein. What am I saying?
Dracula.
Dracula,
yeah.
Yes. I enjoyed this much more than I enjoyed Dracula. I thought that the quality of the letters was much better, in my opinion.
And Elisabeth, what did you think of the quality of the writing?
I was very impressed because I thought that each character had its own way of writing. You could tell when the letter was written by the little 15-year-old teenager, and which one was written by the very proper Madame de Tourvel, and which one was written by the evil Merteuil and Valmont, who are over the top and who take great pride in their appearance, but also in their letter writing, in their style. You could really see it from one letter to another. So that was very enjoyable.
That's sort of the peak of the letter writing craze as well.
Yes.
When you took great pride in not only your writing, but your script itself, the flourishes of your letter, and it was all very much, very, very detailed and artistic.
Yeah, and I believe also at the time, letters in a way were meant to be read in public. You knew that if you wrote to your friend staying at such place, the letter would be read in the salon, and everybody would comment on what was written, how it was written.
Especially if you were a figure of high standing in society.
Yes, yes. And there's a scene, I think, in the book where they say that the letters are open in common at breakfast or something like that. So
And everyone
was a
reads
bit
it
of a
and
public
comments
event.
on it.
Yeah.
It's a pre-Facebook Twitter conversation.
Exactly.
Sharing a
Same
post.
sort of thing.
Do you believe that there is love between Valmont and Merteuil?
That is an excellent question. I would have put it in the other direction. I don't think Valmont loves Merteuil, but I do believe that Merteuil is in love with Valmont. And I was thinking about a mistress of King Louis XV, because the book was written, well, it was published under Louis XVI, but I think it reflects more the world of King Louis XV.
Right.
And he had a mistress called Madame de Pompadour. She remained his mistress for perhaps 5 or 6 years, like really in his bed. And afterwards, she remained his friend, his very good friend. However, she did that by feeding him younger women because she knew she would not satisfy the king anymore. So she decided not to be supplanted by a woman of higher standing, to keep feeding him young women. And I was thinking when I read of Madame de Merteuil feeding this young Cécile
Very
to
similar.
Valmont,
It sounds a bit like Ghislaine Maxwell.
that's something very pervert of trying to keep your scent on a man by feeding him his desires, I guess. And I think that's also the difference between Cécile and Madame de Tourvel, is that the 15 or 16-year-old, Merteuil knew that she would not satisfy Valmont for a long time, that once he would discard her after a few days. But that the other one, the virtuous woman, that one perhaps was more of a real rival, of a danger. She could capture him for a longer time.
Micah, a question for you. Do you think that Choderlos de la Clos was good at writing women?
From taking only this novel as my sources, I would say I think so. They came across believable. Other writers of that era that I have read write very, very unnatural feeling female characters, or they somehow lodge them beneath the male characters, where they're sort of written very, very much in a shadow effect, very flat. Whereas in Dangerous Liaisons, it does feel that he has put both his women and men on the same level of intelligence, and there's definitely sort of a dueling intelligence between them. So I was impressed. With how he wrote women.
He was very aware that the situation of women in society was much more precarious than the situation of men. It's said very clearly that everybody knows Valmont is a tramp, somebody who goes with anyone, who will sleep with anything that moves, basically. But he's still received in high society, even though he's considered to be a libertine. However, Mrs. de Merteuil has to keep her reputation perfect, not just hide the fact that she had perhaps one affair. She has to hide everything. She must be absolutely virtuous. Otherwise, she will be completely an outcast. Yeah.
Do you think, Micah, that in these days, in the now, do you think that those rules still are valid? Like in nobility and in, high society?
From what I know, from what I've read, I would agree that sort of, especially in European structures, European nobility or European royal houses, I think a lot of that sort of male dominance, female submission sort of structure is very prevalent still. I think it's sort of what happens when you have those old institutions like that for such a long period of time. They have to hold on to the old ways of operation in order to remain in operation. Because I think if they broke some of those structures, the entire institution would crumble. I think you would have to lose monarchies. Monarchies are already on the brink of sort of, pulling away from power, becoming more figurehead. And so they have to hold to those structures to keep themselves prevalent.
Imagine that Merteuil is now living now, and she is in a corporate. She lives in a very high-end corporate environment, CEO of an international company. Would she do the same things, you think?
I think there are similar parallels can be made between the situation in the 18th century and today. I'm thinking perhaps more of politics than companies, because in politics, you rely a lot on your public image. And I think that women who are ministers or who are named at the cabinet, they have a narrower margin of error than men. Men in their 30s who are named at important posts, they are named because they have a lot of potential. We believe in them and all of that. If a woman of that same age is named, then everybody will ask, well, why did she get the job? What has she done? Is it because she looks good? Is it because she slept with someone? Already the doubts arise.
Yeah, there was the Scandinavian prime minister who she's in her 30s, and she was on a party and she was dancing a bit and drinking a bit of kava, and it was scandalized. That was, and with a normal guy, with a guy, nobody would even talk about it. It wouldn't have even been filmed.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, she was dancing. I remember that.
Yeah. I remember that as well. Whereas had it been a man?
Because he used the letter form, it is very relevant again, because now we use Twitter, we use Instagram, we use Voxer, we use TikTok, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have WhatsApp. There's so many things that are sort of equivalent of the 18th century letters.
I think the written traces in the book, it ends up being a negative for some of the characters, the fact that there are written traces of what they have done. And today on Twitter, on Facebook, if you write a post that perhaps not the best, perhaps a bit clumsy, 10 years later, you can be punished for it.
Can you imagine that if we would have this conversation in the 80s, it wouldn't have been as relevant? Because there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was no internet even.
It's true. When I think of my grandparents, they probably never had to write a single line in their lives. They went to school, but after that, they didn't have to write anything.
No, like when I went out as a young kid in the 90s, nobody was filming it. We did stupid stuff. We did a lot of stupid stuff because we knew that nobody would ever know about it.
We have much more of a physical record of our almost every aspect of our lives today than even 40, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see Valmont twittering like crazy.
Being incredibly successful on a social media platform.
It would be an Instagrammer with his muscles and looking.
He's very concerned about his physical appearance. Yes.
Yeah, and Micah would have a very, very well curated Instagram, with the perfect lighting and the perfect scripts. And there would be a hairdresser and a makeup artist, and she would curate everything to the T. Volange would be the silly girl on TikTok with the dances and the outfits and
trends. She would not set them, she would follow them.
It's quite a fun exercise to sort of pull characters from such a distant era and try to put them into today's world. How would they function today?
Yeah, well, somebody in the Discord linked to a movie that was made in France. It was Dangerous Liaisons at the era of social media.
For me, it was the second read of Dangerous Liaisons back in 1988. Were you born then, Micah?
I was not. I wasn't born until 2003.
I was in primary school.
Okay.
I read it in 1988 when the movie came out, and it was so good.
There's one thing that I noticed in the style. It's something that is probably lost in translation, at least in translation towards English. The way they address one another. They use the polite form vous in French for all the letters, and there's two exceptions. The exception that they use to, which is the informal form of address, is when Cécile writes to her friend, her college friend, which is normal. And then it's the letter that Danceny writes to the Marquise de Merteuil after they have slept together. For just one letter, he uses the informal style, and it's a love letter, a puppy love letter. Really naive, thinking, I found the woman of my life. And then she writes back to him using the formal vous and just sends him away. So, no, I was just having fun with you. Go away, young man.
Come through with the English translation.
Probably not.
No,
I did not pick up on that.
But also, it says in my edition, there's quite a few comments, and it says that the author was very much obsessed at the time with style. And he kept saying that the letters were real because they contained errors in the style. And I kept reading and looking for them, and I couldn't find any. It's not, it's an 18th century thing. Perhaps at the time, some ways the words were used were new and they were considered errors. And 200 years later, we just don't see it anymore.
Or with later editions after his life, later editions in the 19th century, maybe, the errors were
removed.
I don't think so. I think this one, they said original, and they have notes anytime there's a variation with a later edition. So I think it's a question of aesthetics. His notion of style is not so much grammar or syntax. I think it's a question of aesthetics. So that's probably going to be translated.
Of sort of maybe in the time it was written, considered an error or faux pas, and then today it's accepted, and so we read it and we look for a mistake.
Yeah.
And we don't see anything.
Yeah, and perhaps there's these little subtleties in the letters that we just don't see 200 years later, because at the time they would. The social level is not quite the one we think, or something like that. The
text that we're so far removed from.
Also, yeah.
Would you recommend this book to your viewers, Elisabeth?
Absolutely. The plot line is very interesting. We haven't talked about the ending much, but at some point, Valmont and Merteuil, they fall out, and that is also sort of a plot twist, I guess. It keeps our attention all the way to the end. We want to know how the story unfolds.
That comes in with that drama element of, because it's letters, because each letter is fairly short. It sort of keeps you wrapped into with the story, and it gives you a very good forward momentum. You want to keep reading. It's sort of like a TV show with episodes. Yeah. Of one pulls you into the next.
Yeah, there's one scene with a couple of characters, and then another scene with a different couple of characters, and then we move the story. We weave in the story of all these characters. Yep. It's very cinematic in the way it is presented, and also it does not follow the conventions of theater at the time, which was one action at one time on one day, something like that. And this is clearly not the case. He goes everywhere over 6 months between multiple characters.
When you read French plays of that period, I've only read a couple. They're not super interesting because it's one character in a central location for the entirety of the play. And so there's not as, but again, it can be wonderful as well. Or if it can also be very limited.
Yeah, it depends on how it's done always.
Right.
At the end, so we have our four main characters of Merteuil, Valmont, Tourvel, and Cécile. And in a way, they are all punished for what they have done. Do you think they're all punished equally? Do you think the punishment fits the crime?
That's a good question.
In a way, yes. Merteuil, the way she has to live now is horrible for her. Horrible, because she can't show herself anymore. And that would have been a lot easier. And Valmont, he died, but he could have lived on, he could have just moved to another country or to another city, and he could have do whatever. He could start over. He could have a family and children. It's a man, so it's different.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is move to a new area. Just leave the country.
Cécile, that's a bit obvious. I think she could have get married because she was so young. So if they would have waited a couple of years, she could get married. But yeah, going to a convent was an easy solution. For Duvel, yeah, maybe she was the worst off because she was a true victim in all of it.
She's the one who realizes the most how much she was played. And in a way, she was perhaps the most innocent. She didn't know.
You know, there wasn't even a reason to manipulate her. Only there was a reason that she was loyal to her husband.
She was there. Valmont was bored. And that was it.
An innocent victim just pulled into the story.
Yeah. And she realizes it. But at the same time, she knows that she should have known better. She had been warned by her friend. Valmont had a reputation. But
that's the female ego, because there are a lot of women who think they can change the bad boy, that they can tame the bad boy, and that when they start a relationship, I'll change him. But that's just female ego, and that never goes as planned.
Yeah, it's a novel of lust, but it's also a novel of pride. All the characters have a lot of pride in what they can do. And no, I'm fine. I'm the master of my situation. I know what I'm doing. And they are a little bit blind to their own faults.
Sort of a refusal, refusing to show a personal weakness, or to admit to a personal wrong or a personal misstep.
So I hope you liked the experience.
I loved it. It was super fun.
With the Discord people, it was super interesting. The chats we had were phenomenal. There were there was Caleb and everybody had their view, and it was so enriching to read that novel. It was fabulous. So thank you to all our to everybody who read along and who joined in the conversation. It was fabulous. So thank you, Elisabeth, for being our VIP host. It was wonderful. Our next book will be the Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. Have you ever read anything by Pessoa?
No, that will be a new author to me. I've before, but I've never read anything by him.
It'll be my first time as well.
This is the polar opposite of Dangerous Liaisons. This is so beautiful and so good-hearted, and it brings insights to your life, and to some people it brings answers, and it's wonderful, wonderful. So this is the story of a bookseller, but it's not a real book in the sense that the Book of Disquiet was actually a collection of notes and scribbles of Pessoa, and the book was turned into a book after his death, because he rarely wrote under his own pen, under his own name. This is the story of a bookseller who scribbles down all kinds of things, but they are so profound, so beautiful. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and it is amazing. Thank you for watching. I hope you join us for the next book, and see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.